And when I wrote this story, I drew significantly on my own experiences. I grew up in Atlanta. My dad is from Mexico. My mom is from Mississippi. I grew up speaking English and Spanish. And I've always, contended with the fact that there's this distance or disconnect between how people perceive me and how I perceive myself. And in a way, I think this is, in some sense, a common situation. I think all of us, to some extent, experience this distance, right, between how people might make assumptions about us and how there's a distance between that and how we understand ourselves, right? So sometimes we have to be explaining ourselves to others. There's things underneath the surface that people can't always see, right? In my case, I have blue eyes. I'm very pale, and people are sometimes surprised that I'm Mexican and I speak Spanish, right? So that's something that I dealt with growing up, and that's a lot of what I wanted to explore with Jade. And the character of Jade, she's not me, and she doesn't have the same exact relationship to identity and language as I do. For example, she understands Spanish, but can't quite speak it very well, which is something that I've encountered a lot with lots of people that I've talked to, especially lots of young people, many of my students as well, because I teach Spanish. And so Jade is kind of like, taken from all of those experiences. Writing is one way that we can try to figure these things out, explore what it is we're feeling, maybe even express some of these frustrations and try to let somebody outside of ourselves know what it's like to be inside ourselves, inside our bodies, inside our own, experiences of the world. So I'll tell you a little bit about how this story began. I started writing this book in 2011. So it's really a long time coming. And I want to stress that, I was in college at the time. I was 20 years old, and I had a great idea, and I'm really glad that I went with it, and because I wouldn't have that idea now. And I think that's really important, to trust yourself, that even if you might be young, your ideas are valid and really important, and worth taking seriously. So I'm really glad that I went with it. I was interning at the time at a museum in Washington, D.C., which is called Dumbarton Oaks, and they have multiple collections, including a major collection of pre-Columbian art. So a lot of pre-Columbian art and history appears in the novel. It has a lot to do with, what is it that the Jaguar told her? I really just wanted to write a story that incorporated all of that. And in a way, this has been a part of my own search for identity and belonging and all of that, through writing this book over, the course of many years, writing it, taking a pause, revising it, etc. And so in 2020 was when I signed with my publisher, and my editor, Megan Maria McCullough, is a former Girls Right Now mentee, which I didn't know until a few months ago. And so, yeah, so anyways, everything's coming full circle, I suppose. And Megan really helped me understand how I could revise the book to make it into one cohesive whole that was Jade's story. And the reason why our partnership worked so well is because she really got the story, and she especially got these questions about identity and belonging that I was trying to explore. She really could understand, why I was trying to talk about a character who doesn't fit neatly into categories, right? So I just wanted to share a little bit about that process. And I want to talk a little bit about how, so many factors go into belonging. Language, appearance, family, food, music, cultural traditions. But belonging is also, it often has a lot to do with place, right? So sometimes we feel at home in certain familiar spaces. So for me, there's something really special about this specific wooded area behind my childhood home in Atlanta, where I used to walk and play with my friends when I was growing up. So there's a path there, and it's called the Wildcat Trail. It has this creek running parallel to it, and it was such a special place for me. Even we could say a magical place, that I made it the setting for much of this book. It's, you know, where Jade encounters the jaguar. So, you know, let's just talk a little bit about how you can use fiction and magical realism, you know, to kind of explore these questions. And I'll just say a little bit about how I did this in the book. And I don't mean this in any way a prescriptive way. I'm just sharing, you know, the way I did it. And I think people can do it, you know, the way that feels right for them, the way that they'd like to, you know. So I'm just sharing kind of what I did. In many ways, I think the book reads a lot like realistic fiction, in the sense that Jade goes to middle school, she sings along to Destiny's Child, she really wants to be on the cross country team, you know, these kind of real middle school 2001 things. But there are these magical elements, right? There's a mysterious mirror, there's this feeling she gets when she walks in the forest. So when I was writing and editing it as a magical realist novel, it was important for me that the real and the magical coexist. So there aren't just spurts of magic erupting into the real, right? Instead, the magic is often just underneath the surface. In Jade's, let's say, real life, or more realistic, the more realistic scenes, let's say. And her middle school existence and the challenges her family is facing are also very much present in the more fantastical moments, like when she's with this storyteller Jaguar, for example, right? So in the end, all of it is actually Jade's real life, right? So it's about weaving those together. And all of it is part of her story and her search for belonging, her search for identity in her changing body and in a changing world. One of the challenges of magic realism is getting the reader to accept the magical or fantastical elements as completely normal parts of the story. And one of the most important ways to achieve this has to do with how the characters react to things that might otherwise, or we might otherwise find surprising or unbelievable. So at every moment in writing and editing this book, even when something fantastical was happening, I would ask myself, what would this character really do or say in this situation? How would they react? So this kind of realism is key for keeping your reader on board with the characters and the story, so that when you're reading, you're not jolted out of the story by something that suddenly sounds off key, right? So the characters are responding in a way that makes sense within the story, which doesn't mean they can't be surprised by things. It just, you know, it means that there's that kind of realism. And just briefly as an aside, I want to say, you know, there's many traditions of magic realism, including Latin American tradition, and I'm happy to talk about that more in Q&A, but for now, I'll just leave it for the moment. Like I say, happy to talk about it a little bit later. So yeah, let's get started exploring belonging through fiction and magic realism. And I'm going to set up the first prompt with an excerpt from the book. And in our first prompt, in the first excerpt, we'll think about place and belonging. So yeah, here's the first excerpt. Thank you. All right. Since it was Thursday, oh, I'll set it up briefly, sorry. This is early on in the book, and she's walking home from school through this wooded area that I was telling you about. And she's kind of lost in thought. Since it was Thursday and Katerina had daisies, Jade headed into the forest on her own that afternoon. She liked it this way. She relished the quiet nature sounds, the bird chirps and leaf rustles that were so calming and so different from the idling car engines and squealing laughter of the parking lot. As she stepped along the soft dirt path, the soles of her shoes stamping their rubber pattern into the ground. That feeling came over her again, the sense someone was there, a familiar, invisible presence moving just beyond the leaves that flanked the path. It was as if someone she knew were beckoning to her, but she couldn't quite see them, much as she peered into the brush. Perhaps it was the forest itself that she was sensing. She continued down the path, letting herself be cradled by the comforting sensation as she wound through the trees. She let her mind wander with her steps. She thought of her reflection in the giant mirror in her parents' bathroom and how the mirror couldn't tell her what she wanted to know. It couldn't tell her if she was pretty or what other people thought of her. It couldn't tell her if she would ever be a real OLH girl who wore the uniform just so and knew how to say the whole Hail Mary. There was, of course, the other mirror, the small black one that her mom had told her to keep. The reflection in that mirror wasn't clear. You couldn't use it very well to brush your hair or check your teeth. But what if the mirror showed you something else? Not the flat reflection of how the light bounced off your face, but something different, something beyond that. Was it possible that the shiny black stone in her dresser drawer could show her something that an ordinary mirror could not? The next slide. Thank you. There was truly someone in the woods off the path. Jade had no doubt about it this time. It wasn't a sound that let her know this, just a feeling, a certainty. She turned to look at the brush beside her where she felt the presence, and behind green leaves shining in the late August sun that filtered through the trees, she saw a golden spotted hide. She froze. Jade held her breath. The pelt of a large animal moved noiselessly through the undergrowth. A powerful paw stepped out onto the path right in front of her, followed by the whole animal, a wild cat that rose to the height of her waist, solid and warm and filled with a palpable, terrifying energy. Its hide, taut across well-defined muscles, was dotted with the unmistakable black, eye-like rosettes of the jaguar. It was looking directly at her with its solemn amber-green eyes. Jade was too frightened to scream. She could not think, she could only stare at the muscled jaw and the piercing eyes. And then she realized that it was not a jaguar standing before her, not a jaguar at all, but an old, old man. So this is the first time, right, that Jade encounters Eatsley, the jaguar. Everything's super new for her. And as you can see, right, you can see the choices I made about how I wanted to evoke the forest, this particular place, kind of the magical and the real coexisting at once, a place where Jade is really comfortable. And it's her first encounter with the jaguar and the reader's first encounter with the jaguar as well. So, you know, to answer the question of what would this character do? How would this character react? She's never seen him before in this particular moment. So of course, you know, she's surprised. So, yeah, now I would like for us to think about place. So think about a particular place where you've spent time. Could be a house, a room, a vacation spot, a train, a church, any place that holds significance for you. Why is this place important to you? What memories does it evoke? What is your relationship to this place? So I just really want to think about place and the places that are important to us and why, right? Because place can be so important for evoking setting in fiction. So let's just think about place and write about it. I'm really excited to see what you write. Now, this place that you just wrote about so beautifully, we're going to imbue it with a kind of magic. And the way you do it is entirely up to you, okay? So maybe the place is magical because of a feeling that it gives off. Maybe it's magical because of some seemingly impossible element or property, or maybe it's simply magical because of how you write about it in the surprising similes, metaphors, adjectives, and verbs you choose. So now that you've imbued your place with magic in some way, think about that for a minute. You're going to imagine a character who enters this magical place. The character can be you, can be similar to you, but the character is not you, right? How does this character feel Do they feel that they belong in this place? Do they feel that they do not belong? Are they unsure of whether they belong? Write the character's experience as they enter this magical space. And I really look forward to seeing what you write.
If you do have any other questions, you can stay connected today with Alexandra by through Instagram and through Twitter. They're both right there in the screen for you. Please feel free to reach out. She welcomes it all.